And we are live. What's going on? YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn Live. It's your boy, Billy Rowe. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. Today is Wednesday. And if it is Wednesday, you should know what that means. It's time for a Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Jumping straight into it. Tonight's topic is breaking bad habits. As always, I like to explain what I mean by my topic, but this topic is pretty straightforward. What I mean by breaking bad habits is breaking the bad habits that we develop in our lives. Sometimes what feels like instantaneously, but my belief is that we develop these bad habits over time. And the more that we interact with these bad habits, the more that they solidify or take root in our life. And then the more that they take root in our life, the more difficult it is to move away from said bad habits. So tonight, unlike most Wednesday words, instead of 3 tools for the first row, I have 4 tools for the first row when it comes to breaking bad habits. So let's jump straight into it. When it comes to breaking bad habits, the very first tool that I thought was super important to put up was don't wait until things get extreme to change. The reason why I put this tool first is because in the breaking of the bad habits that I've had, or when I've had to break bad habits in my life, typically what has jolted the need to break that bad habit has been something extreme has taken place in my life, whether it's something extremely detrimental, something extremely sometimes extremely positive, but more times often than not, it's been extremely detrimental. But the reason why I think that it's important that this was the first tool about not waiting until things get extreme to change is because, as I said in the beginning, habits are something that develop over time. Les Brown, one of my favorite quotes from Les Brown is that practice doesn't make us perfect; it simply makes us better. And it doesn't matter, like the world around us, life doesn't matter, doesn't take into account what we're practicing and say practice only makes you better when you're practicing healthy, positive things. That's not how life works. Practice makes you better when you're practicing negative, toxic things as well. And so when we wait until there's something like an extreme situation to make a change, what we've done is we've kind of solidified that habit and really reinforced it to where now it's not as easy to uproot out of our lives. I liken it to living here in Utah where it snows. Every time it snows, like I would say probably like 9.5 times out of 10, that's how much I do this. Every time that it snows, that day that I get up, I go out and I shovel the snow off the sidewalk. I do this because if I allow the day to get too far into the day, the snow begins to melt. And then what happens is then you don't feel like going out there at that point. So then the snow begins to freeze. And now instead of just scooping and shoveling fluffy snow off the sidewalk, what ends up happening is now I'm trying to break through ice. And it's a much more difficult and taxing job to get the snow, actually, to get the hazard off of the sidewalk. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to get the snow off the sidewalk so nobody slips and falls. But if the ice is left there, I can take all the fluffy stuff off. If the ice is left there, there's still the habit, or there's not the habit, there's still the hazard. And so how that relates to habits, hazards and habits, how that relates to habits is that when we allow our habits to kind of like create and drill their roots down and solidify, we might have an extreme circumstance come up. Smoking, for instance, we might be a chain smoker, and so we're smoking and we're smoking and we're smoking, and over time, that smoking pattern or habit begins to damage our lungs. Well, then we find out we maybe have lung cancer, or we have an asthma attack, or we have I forget what the other one is. It starts with a C. But we have something that is wrong with our lungs. And so we say, oh, okay, I'm going to stop smoking. Well, yeah, you can stop smoking and maybe that will cease to create additional damage. But there is a layer of damage that has already been done. And it takes the body a long time, if it ever does, to recover. And so that's why tool number 1 is really important. Don't wait until things are extremes. You will be given clues and hints as to when you are dealing with bad habits. It'll be like, "Ooh, that didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out, and I kind of should have made a better decision there, and I had the opportunity to make a better decision." There's still times where I make poor decisions in life today, and even when I make those decisions, I'm like, "Ooh, I could have made a better decision." So how can I foster making better decisions for the next time that I have the opportunity to make a poor decision? Again, don't wait until it gets to the extreme. I don't wait until my decision is 16 decisions down the road and I'm still doing the same thing, 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 same thing. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, now I have an opportunity to do something different. But if all I've been doing is practicing the same thing, it's really at some point now going to take something extreme to jolt me out of my habitual behavior, whether it's toxic or positive behavior. It's going to take something extreme to jolt me out of it. So that's tool number one. Don't wait until things are extreme to make a change. Tool number two, when it comes to breaking bad habits, is is about prioritization. Establish your priorities. Um, the reason why this is important, there's a couple of reasons why it's important, but the main reason that it's important is that by establishing what your priorities are in any behavior, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with your career, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with exercise, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with diet, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with your relationship. By establishing your priorities, what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to focus on what matters to you. And again, I don't know if you guys have ever read the book The Secret, but wherever our focus is where our energy flows. So therefore, when I say establish your priorities, what I'm saying is establish what you want to focus on, because that's where your energy and your effort's going to go. It'd be like having a garden, and on one side of the garden you have tomatoes, and on the other side of the garden you have strawberries. And tomatoes kind of they don't take a lot of work to grow, but neither do strawberries take a lot of work to grow. But if you don't give one side, if I'm just focused on the tomatoes and I'm giving them the soil and I'm making sure that I'm taking the weeds out and I'm keeping rodents away from them and pests or insects off of them, then the tomatoes are going to flourish. And if I'm not doing those things because my priority is not the strawberries, or my attention or energy is not focused on the strawberries, as much as they may want to grow, as much as they may want to flourish like the tomatoes, are not going to have that growth that you're wanting it to have. And so this is why establishing priorities is really important. Sometimes what happens is, because we have zero priorities established, because of our lack of priorities, what happens is habits will sometimes slip in, and it's like, oh, one of the things for me, playing video games. Love to play video games. I went multiple years without playing video games. And then I allowed the video game habit, because of a lack of priorities. It was like, okay, I have some time. What can I do? I don't know what I want to do right now. Oh, well, video games came right back in as an old bad habit of, let's take 4 or 5 hours, 10 hours a day playing video games. Yeah, can't do that if you want to do the things that you say you want to do today. So establishing those priorities, what it does is, by having priorities, I'm sorry, and establishing them, what it does is it acts as like this boundary. And the way I look at this boundary is, here's the bad habit. And when the bad habit starts to come in, it hits this boundary, which kind of creates a vibration or sounds an alarm to us mentally and says, hey, wait a minute, I've tried this habit before and it's never seems to work out quite the way that I would like it. So again, going back to me playing video games, having that video game now hit a boundary, because I've set a certain priority, like, hey, I want to have downtime, relax time, R&R and all that stuff, but I also want to make sure that I'm productive with my time as well. So I can't have 28,000 days of downtime, R&R, and then one day of productivity and be like, oh yeah, see, I'm good balance. That's not what I want. I want to have more productive days than I do just rest and relax days. That's at least where I'm at right now. Maybe that ratio will change later on in life, but we'll see. But by bouncing against that boundary, what it does is it creates a vibration, and it sounds an alarm to us mentally that, hey, wait, let's assess this behavior, whatever that behavior is. Let's assess it and see if this is a behavior that fits into what we have as our priorities right now. The other part of this, though, is not just establishing priorities. It's also about being willing to be honest, so that way that you are focusing your priorities on the right things. So again, one thing to say, I really want to go to the gym 5 times a week. Okay, great. You want to go to the gym 5 times a week. You realize there's only 7 days in a week. That means that you only have 2 days that you can't go to the gym. Do you want to use those days to rest? Do you want to make sure that you're not tearing up your 5 days of progress by picking out on junk food and highly fatty foods? What do you want to do? But being honest about what your priorities are, being honest with yourself, because you can lie to everybody else. Your priorities will, whatever you really believe are your priorities, or whatever priorities you lack, will show. Inevitably, they will show. But by being honest with those, what you end up doing is you end up focusing on the things that are really important. When we are dishonest with ourselves in regards to our priorities, when we're saying what I call the ear service. Oh, well, oh, this sounds good, so I'm going to say this is my priority. This sounds good, so I'm going to say this is my priority. What ends up happening is we truly either don't focus on the things that we say are our priorities, which means they're not our priorities, or if we do focus on those priorities, sometimes what we're doing is we're focusing on the wrong priorities, because we're focusing on something for the sake of being seen, not for the sake of actually adding value to our lives or the lives around us. So that's tool number 2, is establishing your priorities. Being sure that you have a clear, concise target that you want to hit when it comes to the habits that you want to have in your life. Going on to tool number 3. Tool number 3 is give yourself time to adjust. I am very hard on myself, and I try to give myself grace. I try to give myself patience. And some days I get that super right. Other days I get that super wrong. But giving yourself time to adjust is really about having patience. Just like I said, a bad habit may feel like, oh my God, it's this concrete habit, but it's something that happened and developed over time. It developed over slices, like a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread, it can be sliced up, but it's still a loaf of bread. That's how bad habits are. It's like a slice here, slice there, slice there, slice there, and all of a sudden you have a loaf of a bad habit. Giving yourself time to adjust is really about being patient. You got to realize eat you don't well hopefully you don't sit down and eat a whole loaf of bread, but you do eat it slice by slice by slice by slice. You might eat 2 slices if you make a sandwich like I do. So you might do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then that slice of that loaf of bread is gone. Give yourself time to adjust if you're going to be breaking a bad habit. It doesn't have to be this cold turkey experience. It doesn't have to be, well, never again. I mean, sometimes it comes to that, but that's typically if you've waited until it's an extreme. It's like being diagnosed with diabetes. You know, you can be pre-diabetic, and there's some things that you can do to eat that loaf of bread slice by slice to dial that back and get your blood sugars in a healthy space. Or you can ignore that and then get a whole loaf of bread and then be full blown type 1, type 2 diabetic. And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, the adjustment period, you don't have as much grace. And so now it's like you can't eat sugar at all because your blood sugar will spike. Those are the things. That's what I mean when I say give yourself time to adjust. You give yourself the appropriate time to adjust. If you don't take heed to tool number 1, don't wait until things are extreme to change, then you're not going to probably have as much flexibility in your adjustment time. But if you do take heed to tool number 1 and you actually aren't waiting until the actual very last minute to make the change, then you might have a lot, well, you will have a lot more grace in the changes that you need to make. Um, Realize again, it's a process. And this is where, even for myself, I am learning to apply this to Billy as the everyday person who has to live Billy's life. That's who I'm learning to apply this to myself, is that this is a process. This is something that took me a while to get to, and it's going to take me a while to get away from. And the other part of that adjustment is that you might have hiccups along the road, and that's okay. You might slip back into your bad habit because it's comfortable. And in all honesty, a lot of times why we glean to bad habits is because they're safe, they're predictable, and we know exactly what to expect from them. Even though for some reason we think we're going to expect something else, it's never a surprise to us when things fall apart. It's like, hey, look, if I have a bad habit of yelling all the time, every time I get mad, and the person that I'm yelling at gets confrontational and then we have an argument, it's not that I want the argument, but it's predictable. It's that I understand that, hey, if I yell at this person and they yell back at me, I'm not going to be surprised. But if I speak softly, calmly, and collective to the person and they yell back at me, now I'm jolted and I'm shocked. Like, wait a minute, I wasn't yelling, but I can. So that is why tool number three: give yourself time to adjust. Give yourself time to adapt. It can be really difficult, really difficult to quit things cold turkey. Only in the event of an emergency do most humans quit things cold turkey. Um, most humans only in the most times it takes an event or an emergency for people or to quit. I don't know why I can't get this sentence out. Most times it takes people to experience some type of form of an emergency in order for them to quit things cold turkey. That's what I meant to say. Man, doing these things live, woo, boy, I tell you. So that's tool number three: is give yourself time to adjust. And then the tool number four, which is really a bonus tool, is that after you've given yourself time to adjust, what will happen is as you eradicate the bad habit from your life, you're going to have this space that's available to fill with whatever you want to fill it with. So, tool number four, when it comes to breaking bad habits, is to fill the void. And filling the void, what that does is it makes sure that there's not a whole lot of space for bad habits to leach back into your life or seep back into your life, because you're doing something else with the time that you've now freed up. You're doing something else with the activity that you're with the activity space that you're no longer occupying with the bad habit. It's so important to fill the void. A lot of times we go running back to bad habits like bad ex-lovers. And unfortunately, in that embrace of that bad habit, we end up really sacrificing everything that we've built to move away from that bad habit. So that's tool number four. It's super brief. Just take the space that you're creating by breaking your bad habits and fill them with the things that you want, with the healthier habits that you truly desire. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes you're going to slip, sometimes you're going to fall back into your bad habit, but that's okay. As soon as you recognize it, as soon as it bounces against that barrier or that boundary, recognize it, address it, and then turn around and refill the hole, because there's going to be a new hole that's left. It's like patching up a wall. Oh, there's a hole in the wall. Yeah, we're not going to replace the whole wall. What we're going to do is we're going to patch that hole so that we have a solid surface again. So those are the tools that I wanted to share with you. Let's go over them really quick one more time. The very first tool being, don't wait until things are extreme to make a change. Pay attention to the warning signs. People, pay attention to the warning signs. And when you see those warning signs, address them in as real time as possible. So that way they don't build up over time and make it difficult to change the habit or require something extreme to take place in order to change the habit. Tool number two is establish your priorities. Often bad habits, they form due to a lack of proper prioritization, which creates a lack of proper focus, which creates a lack of proper allocation of our energy. Tool number three is give yourself time to adjust. Be patient. It took you a while to get into this process of the bad habit. You've practiced to make better at the bad habit. You're going to have to practice to make better at the healthier decisions to replace it. And then finally, tool number four is fill the void. We typically refill our holes when we have a hole from a broken bad habit. If we don't fill that hole, we typically will refill that empty space with something that is familiar. And unfortunately, in that space, the habitual behavior that is probably negative or toxic is what we go back to, and we refill it. We fill that void with that again. So make sure you fill the void so that there's not space or idleness, we'll call it, in idleness for the habit to reattach to and foster in and grow back again. So as always with the Wednesday word, I like to share a personal story, something that got me thinking about this topic. And it's interesting, actually. This story is interesting. What got me thinking about this topic? So, in thinking about breaking bad habits, the story that got me really thinking about this was a couple weeks ago. My middle son was sick, and he was just coming out of a 4-day weekend of vacation from school, and it was time for him to go back to school, but he wasn't feeling well. And he's getting dressed and he's getting ready to head out the door. And he's like, "Hey, Dad, I'm ready to go to school." And I was like, "You can't go to school, son. You're sick. You don't feel well, and we can't send you to school if you don't feel well." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So, he stays home for the day. And it got me thinking about the bad habit that a lot of people have, or I'm going to say had, about going to work sick, going to the workplace. So there was, I mean, before 2019 and COVID hit, if I was sick, I still went to work. Like I had to be bedridden in order to not go to work. It was like, oh, I'm coughing. Oh, I'm sneezing. Oh, I have a headache. Oh, I have a fever. That's not enough. I'm going to work today. Can't miss a day of work. And as admirable as I thought that was at the time, now looking back, especially with the change in life, it was like, why was I so bent on going to work and not focused on my own health and recovery? So that behavior of just going to work sick, rain, sleep, snow, whatever it may be, um, well, I guess sick because rain, sleep, that's just weather. But going to work when I was sick, that was actually a bad habit because it was conditioning my mind and my priorities to say, "Hey, Billy, regardless of how you feel, you go and you show up at work and you do your job." And really, the healthier behavior is when you are healthy, Billy, and go to work, show up and do your job, excel at it to the best of your ability. But when you need time to recover physically, sometimes mentally, you need to take that time and focus on your recovery. And so I started thinking about how this pandemic has changed the dynamic of how our children will perceive the workplace. Whereas we would think, oh, well, you were sick, oh, you had a cough, you had a headache, and you didn't go to work. And we would minimize that in the past. This pandemic has now shifted from where I would typically be like, hey, you're not sick enough, you're up and moving, so go to school. Now all of a sudden my perspective has changed. Unfortunately, it took something extreme. It took a pandemic in order for my mindset to change and say, wow, my kids are going to grow up in a world to where when you're sick, you don't go to work. What? That's crazy, but that's phenomenal and that's healthy. It's something that we should be teaching our children. Hey, when you don't feel well, take a day, take a moment, heal your body because you only get one body, you can get another job. That's what we should be teaching our children. And so it got me thinking about breaking bad habits in general, but it was really specifically about how my son is going to grow up in a world to where work is flexible. A lot of companies are talking about you can work from home full time, or you can work from home and go into the office like 2 to 3 days a week. A lot of companies are talking about flexibility, a lot more, what I perceive to be a healthier work life balance for those who have the opportunity to do so. But also, companies are a lot more understanding and want you to be, if you're sick, don't come into the office since the pandemic has started. Now, will that continue once the fears of the pandemic subside? I don't know. I don't have that answer. But what I do know is that I am teaching my child now the lessons that I'm learning from breaking a bad habit that I once held as like a truth to. If you want to excel, if you want to grow, if you want to thrive, if you want to be at the top of the company, these are the things you have to do. Yeah, there's some things that you do have to do to get to the top. However, sacrificing your health and risking your health is not one of them. That's never worth it. And so that's the story that kind of got me thinking about this, that really began um, fostering this idea for this particular Wednesday word. And I really like it, just like it was almost like a thought bomb went off in my head. It was like boom, and all of a sudden I was down the path. If you know me personally, you know I have probably hundreds of thoughts in a day. So once a thought like blows up and actually starts to occupy space in my mind, it's like, wow, I got to get that thought out. And that's where a lot of these Wednesday words come from, are these thought bombs that say, man, that's really a good topic. I want to explore that. And then I explore, and this is what I come out to you guys with the Wednesday word. So that's what I got for today on the Wednesday word. I thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really quick, do not forget, if you have not done so already, go to firstrow.com and order your book. Buy your book so that it can be shipped to you. Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion. This is the first book out of the first row. There's going to be more to come, but this is the first one. And really, this book is like a personal Wednesday word that has Wednesday word after Wednesday word after Wednesday word, and it is a roadmap on how to move from job like mentalities to focused passion like mentalities or passion mentalities. So, definitely, if you haven't done so already, order your copy of that today. You can go to www.1stwroe.com and order that book today. The other thing is that coming up, when is it? In a couple of weeks, in a week or so, coming up, we're going to have a new piece of content that we're going to have. It's going to be called Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe Live. Maybe we'll change the name. I don't know, but that's what we're going to call it for now. That is actually going to air. Its first live show is going to air on Tuesday, March 22nd. That will be at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you can tune into that live, I would recommend it. Conversations with Carolyn are always phenomenal. I cannot edify her enough. She's a mindset and spiritual guidance coach. And we just have an amazing friendship that I just really want to open up a lens to. So if you get an opportunity, join that live on March 22nd. And then, as always, next week's Wednesday word will be March 9th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the topic is not going to be breaking bad habits. My apologies. The topic is going to be stop the show. And I cannot wait until you guys have this one. When I say I have these mind thought bombs that go off in my mind, this is one of them. And I think it's really timely right now based on the things we're dealing with in 2022. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. For those who are watching live for the premiere, or for those who are watching via the replay, I appreciate your support of the first row. I look forward to bringing you so much more things in 2022 and beyond. So stay tuned for the new content that is going to be coming out. Again, get your copy of Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion. If you have your copy, post something on social media. Let people know that you're going through your journey and share that journey with them so they have the opportunity to engage in that journey for themselves. Other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. As always, if you like this video, share it. If you share it, like it. I'm always happy to engage with you in the comments, in the live chat. The comments, I will engage with you up until the first 7 days of the content being out. After that, we move on to the next content. So thank you again. Until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on